Lloyd stood just outside the door, silent, listening. Inside, Julian's voice came first, tense with disbelief. He asked Javier to clarify what he meant. Did he mean that someone had stolen Lloyd's body? Javier answered calmly. He said it was only a possibility. He had read a theory in a book that it was possible. To inhabit another person's body, he explained, would take considerable magic power. It would also require a powerful mana tether. He told Julian that because of the suspicion, he had investigated it. He checked on Lloyd while he slept, looking for anything unusual. Lloyd was surprised to hear that. Julian asked if he had felt anything strange, like another soul. Lloyd awaited Javier's response with quiet intensity. Javier said he did not feel anything out of the ordinary. The soul felt naturally connected to the body. Lloyd gave a quiet sigh of relief. Javier added that it was only a suspicion, and told Julian not to take his words too seriously. But Julian said Lloyd's sudden change was still a big deal. Listening just outside, Lloyd thought Javier could surely feel his presence. It was obvious he wanted Lloyd to hear his theory. Then Julian mentioned the family debt. He said he had no idea about it. He did not realise Lloyd had been working so hard to save the family, while he had been worrying about small things like school. Then he smiled and said Lloyd should be praised for what he had done for their family. He had saved the estate after all. The system alerted Lloyd that Julian's favourability had increased by 2 points and now stood at -59. Lloyd grinned, realising Julian was a key character as well. He could be another source of RP if he played his cards right. The system asked if that was all he could think about after gaining the respect of his brother. Lloyd opened the door and walked into the room. He looked at Julian and told him it was time to start his training and that they needed to go. Julian asked where. Lloyd grinned and told him it was time to train his body. Lloyd led them to the workshop. He showed Julian how to flatten the clay for the bridge. Then he showed him how to spread the dirt and rocks close together on top. After that, Bangle ate it and used her steel dung ability to form the steel rods. Once the metal cooled, Lloyd had Podong twist the rods together to form the cables. Then Lloyd handed the shovel to Julian and told him that ended the tutorial. Julian stared at the shovel, confused. Lloyd told him he had to complete each step correctly. If he messed up, the entire project would be affected. He pointed a finger at Julian, warning him that not only the estate's future, but even his academy plans, rested on the completion of this project. Nervously, Julian asked why he was putting such a huge responsibility on him. Lloyd asked what he meant. He said it was because this was important, and he needed someone intelligent and responsible in charge, just like Julian. Then he called him a little brat. Julian looked at him in surprise, and thought that, once again, Lloyd was a little late with the insult. Lloyd headed into the city, carrying several of the bridge designs with him. As he walked, he thought about the suspension bridge. He already knew it would be impossible to build with his own skills alone. That was why he needed to ask someone for help. He stopped in front of a workshop and looked at it. This was the person he needed. He stepped inside. A dwarf sat within, drinking alcohol. The moment he saw Lloyd, he immediately said no. The dwarf was called Koreanmanga, the royal craftsman. Lloyd asked him why he said no when he'd not even asked him anything yet. Koreanmanga dismissed him and told him to scram. He said he did not want to know. Lloyd expected this reaction. His stubbornness was exactly as described in the novel. He would not do anything unless something piqued his interest, even if the request came from the Queen herself. But Lloyd had come prepared. He held out the blueprints for the bridge and presented the designs in front of him. Koreanmanga, not paying attention, said he was not interested. Then he glanced up and paused as he saw the designs. Lloyd rolled the blueprints back up, asked for forgiveness, and started to leave, saying he would ask another blacksmith instead. Koreanmanga told him to wait and set his bottle down firmly. He said that if the rigidity of the structure was off, it could be disastrous. Lloyd said he knew, and that was why he came to him. Lloyd said that if the worst happened and the bridge failed, the responsibility would fall entirely on him. And he would say if only Master Corgadus had helped, none of it would have happened. Corgadus stared at him and narrowed his eyes. He called Lloyd an arrogant prick and asked if he was threatening him. Lloyd laughed and said, "Of course not. It was only a plea to a master's conscience." Corgadus looked at the grin on Lloyd's face and said his expression said otherwise. After a moment, Corgadus sighed and asked to take a look at the blueprints. After studying them for a while, he told Lloyd that now he understood. He truly was the only person in the Empire who could make something like this. Lloyd said that was why he threatened him, then quickly corrected himself and said he meant asked for help. Corgadus told him to take that stupid, smug smile off his face. He said that if Lloyd was smart enough to design something like this, then he must have planned to pique his interest on purpose. Lloyd said he would never do such a thing. Corgadus told him to stop lying. Then Corgadus crossed his arms and told Lloyd that he would help him construct the bridge. Lloyd bowed so hard that his head smacked against the desk. With Julian working on the wires and the royal workshop handling the bridge's truss work, Lloyd and Javier were able to focus on the suspension towers. The two of them got to work immediately, using their mana blast to dig deep into the ground. Suddenly, a voice shouted from behind them, ordering them to stop what they were doing at once. A group of men arrived, escorted by guards, and accused Lloyd of tricking the Queen. Then they accused him of wasting money from the royal treasury and said they would not let him get away with it. They were all taken to the throne room. The men demanded that the bridge construction be halted. They insisted there was already a bridge on the river, one that had stood for 30 years without issue. They asked for Lloyd to be punished for fraud. Then they demanded that the funds meant for the bridge be redirected instead toward repairs for the royal palace. The Queen sat both parties down at the table, giving each of them the chance to state their case. She asked the leader of the Builders Guild to put forth his argument first. The guild leader said they had built the bridge 30 years ago and had constructed it to withstand any future flooding. He added that their wedge-shaped columns were the key to the bridge never collapsing. He claimed it was an insult to their guild that Lloyd insisted it would fall. Lloyd thought to himself that the bridge would definitely collapse. He had read it in the book. But he couldn't use that as an excuse here. He wondered what reasoning he could possibly offer instead. The Queen then asked Lloyd to state his argument. Lloyd asked if he might direct a question to the official sitting next to the guildmaster. The man jolted in surprise. Lloyd narrowed his eyes and grinned at him, then asked how much he had been paid. The man flinched, then slammed his fist on the table and demanded to know how Lloyd could make such a false accusation. Grinning, Lloyd thought that the man's reaction spoke volumes. It was practically written all over his face. Everyone in Korea knew what happened when a politician and a businessman got chummy. Usually the politician took money from the businessman in exchange for favours, and in return, the businessman gained special treatment, easier approvals and profitable advantages he would never have gotten otherwise. The Queen told Lloyd she thought he was smarter than this, but he had just committed a serious mistake. Lloyd gulped at the Queen's warning. She told him that accusing a royal official without any grounds was a crime. She demanded that they prepare Lloyd to face his judgment at once. In the courthouse, Lloyd knelt before the Queen, bound tightly as she declared that he had insulted a royal vassal. Because of that insult, she said she now had to restore her own honour. Javier watched nervously from the side, his hand hovering near the hilt of his sword, ready to draw if things went badly. Padong sat on his shoulder, panicked and trembling. The Queen asked Lloyd if he had any last words. After a brief pause, Lloyd spoke. He asked that the guilty party's entire bloodline be exterminated. Padong and Javier both stared at him in alarm. The Queen then turned to the two other men and asked if they agreed with his request. They bowed and answered that it was the right thing to do. Javier tensed, preparing himself to move as the Queen fell silent. Then she spoke again. She said she would prove her vassal's innocence. The two men looked up at her in confusion. At her command, a group of mages stepped forward and surrounded the official. The Queen ordered them to use the confession spell on him. The man looked around in panic and tried to protest, calling out to Her Majesty. The mages cast the spell, and Lloyd laughed at him like a madman. The two men were flogged and left tied to a post in the centre of the city square. Lloyd stood before them and looked up. He told them that he had convinced the Queen not to involve their families. Then he asked if they thought he was a nice person. From the side, Javier remembered Lloyd laughing like a madman in the courthouse and did not agree. After that, the Queen assigned all of the kingdom's workers to Lloyd's project. The mages used gravitational magic to lighten the weight of the massive stone blocks, making them far easier to transport. Because of that, the work on the suspension towers was completed in no time. Lloyd's helpers secured the wires to each of the towers as a massive crowd gathered to watch in amazement. Among the spectators were Javier and Julian. Julian remarked that Lloyd was incredible. Javier smiled at him and said he was incredible as well. He said that Julian had never done manual labour before, but he had not given up. Then he brought up the day Julian had asked him to teach him the sword, only for the weapon to end up being too heavy for him. Javier looked at Julian's muscular arms and told him it should not be an issue now. The rest of the construction proceeded perfectly. Not long after, the bridge was completed. And as the system informed Lloyd, he had earned a large amount of RP for his monumental achievement. The Queen honoured Lloyd before the gathered crowd and named the bridge after both him and Javier. It would be called the Lojavi Bridge. Then she bestowed upon Lloyd the title of Master Builder as a reward for his achievements. From within the crowd, Corgadus watched in disbelief. He thought that they had really made that run to Master Builder when it was he himself who had built the entire platform. But after a moment, he relented. No one else could have designed something like that. Maybe Lloyd really did deserve the title. Lloyd bowed before the Queen, thinking that the payment for the bridge should be enough to finish paying off the rest of their debt. But then he realised he still had one more problem to solve. Standing before him, the Queen watched Lloyd closely, wondering how she should make use of him next. It was exactly the thought Lloyd had been afraid of. Still, he had to find a way out of it. He wanted to live as a rich bum, doing nothing but eating and sleeping all day. The Queen told Lloyd that she had a request for him, but that she would ask it once they returned to the palace. Lloyd bowed again and said as she wished, while thinking to himself that he would escape the Queen's grasp after solving just one more of her problems. Back in the throne room, Lloyd bowed before the Queen as she prepared to bestow yet another reward upon him. She proclaimed that she would grant him a noble title and an estate befitting his abilities. The nobles in attendance did not like that at all. The son of a country baron rising to true nobility did not sit right with them. The Queen was well aware they would not approve. She also knew it would be a pain to listen to their complaints. Lloyd thanked the Queen for her generosity. Then he asked if he might be so bold as to request something even greater. The nobles watching quietly scoffed at his audacity. The Queen told him to speak his mind. Lloyd asked her to withdraw her offer of a title and land. Instead, he requested a thorough cleansing of the Royal Academy. The Queen's eyes widened in confusion. She asked him to explain. Lloyd told her that the Academy was rife with corruption, inequality, and despicable behaviour. He said the students cared only about their ranks as nobles and subjected anyone beneath them to mental and physical bullying. He went on to say that the Academy's educators were fully aware of this and still chose to turn a blind eye, more interested in lining their pockets or receiving favours. He concluded that this situation was far from the ideals upon which the Royal Academy had been founded. The throne room fell silent as the nobles glanced uneasily at one another. Then Lloyd called out to Javier. Javier stepped forward and approached the Queen. He presented a scroll and said that they had conducted an investigation for months and had gathered evidence, including multiple testimonies. Several nobles immediately pleaded with the queen, begging her not to listen to what they called lies. The queen glared at them and ordered that those who had just spoken be subjected to a confession spell. After that, the queen personally oversaw the review of all the evidence Lloyd had gathered. Then she moved through the academy itself. One by one, those found to be guilty were arrested and dragged straight to the whipping posts. By the time the purge was finished, the Royal Academy had been thoroughly cleansed. Lloyd and Javier stood on a ridge overlooking the academy as they watched the men being arrested below. Lloyd grinned as he watched. Javier remarked that he looked pleased about the academy being cleansed. Lloyd asked what he was talking about. He said the real reason he was smiling was because the queen was so focused on the academy that she had completely forgotten about him. Then he laughed and said that now he could finally sneak back to the countryside and enjoy the fruits of his labour. Javier told him he understood why he was pleased, but asked if he really needed to make a face like that. Suddenly, the Queen's Knight appeared behind Lloyd and spoke. He said he brought a message from Her Royal Highness. Lloyd jumped in surprise. The knight told Lloyd that he could return home whenever he wished, but that he must attend tomorrow night's banquet first. Lloyd agreed at once. Then the knight continued and said that Lloyd's plan to create a diversion with the academy had been outstanding, and that the Queen respected his wish to live a sweet, lazy life. Lloyd listened in stunned silence, thinking that it seemed he had been in the palm of her hand the entire time. Then the knight turned and left. Lloyd leaned close to Javier and whispered, asking if he had not sensed the man approaching. Javier told him that he had sensed nothing at all. Then he added that Isekai'd was a swordmaster, so it made sense. Back in the guest room, Lloyd sat with Julian. Julian asked Lloyd if he had really planned all of this from the moment he beat up Diego that day. Lloyd told him of course he had. Once he finished the project, he knew he would be rewarded, and that had been his chance to ask the Queen to investigate the academy. Then, after a short pause, he remembered to call Julian a little brat. Julian looked up at him and told him he didn't need to force himself to say that anymore. He said he trusted Lloyd more than anyone else. Lloyd's eyes widened in surprise as the system informed him that Julian's resentment had faded. Julian now respected him, and his approval had increased by 65 points, granting a large RP bonus. After an awkward pause, Lloyd told him he had almost vomited from how cheesy that was. Julian agreed, saying he regretted it already. The next evening, the banquet was in full flow. Lloyd was doing his best to hide himself among the crowd, but the Queen found him with ease. She asked him if he really thought she wouldn't notice him hiding like that, comparing him to a mole. Javier approached and said he was in awe of her insight. She asked Javier if he also thought Lloyd looked like one. Javier replied that he had thought the same thing once, remembering an earlier moment. Lloyd looked at him, wondering why he looked so pleased with himself. The Queen asked Lloyd to come closer. Lloyd stepped forward and bowed. After a pause, she told him to come closer. Lloyd shuffled forward, and she said closer once more. Now, nearly face to face, she whispered the word again, closer. Lloyd, looking increasingly nervous, informed her that if he got any closer, he might be too close. The Queen leaned in and whispered into his ear that if he ever changed his mind, she had everything prepared for him. Then she turned and walked away, telling him to enjoy the banquet. Lloyd clenched his fist in celebration, thinking jackpot. He celebrated inwardly, pleased that he now had a nice little nest egg. If anything happened, he knew he could rely on the Queen. He began enjoying the banquet, eating freely as he thought about his next plans once he returned to the estate. Then he paused. He thought about what was supposed to happen to the Queen in 3 years. If that fate came to pass, he would lose his nest egg entirely. As he stood there, he heard a voice from behind him. A man spoke words Lloyd found familiar. He said that the banquet would continue until the moon sets. Lloyd knew he had heard that line somewhere. He thought for a moment, then realised it was from the part of the book when the Queen was betrayed and lost her arm. It was a secret code used by the conspirators planning her assassination. He wondered why this was happening now, 3 years too early, and more importantly, why Sir Kyle of all people was the one saying it.